Dark and Darker. An unforgiving, hardcore, fantasy, FPS, dungeon, PvPvE adventure. My name is Dylon57, and welcome back to another epic video. We are going to experience what it's like to dive headfirst into this dark, brutal experience, and I'll offer my perspective as a new player who generally likes games with a similar feel. Before we start, I'm trying to hit 500 subscribers. If you're interested to see what I have going on, smash the subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Loading into the game for the first time, I was genuinely impressed with the look and feel of the character creation. It's simple and to the point. My only real critique of it is that the strengths and weaknesses are a little obtuse. Like the Bard's Con is loud. It would be nice if you could see the actual stats of the characters relative to each other as opposed to just less health or more health, so you can make an informed decision. Kind of like in D&D, how you can see a stats page. It would be nice if they had a toggleable stats panel. I decided I would be a barbarian because I felt like smashing stuff with big axe. The lobby reminds me of something you would see in any other PvP type game, like League of Legends or something, where you can add up to 2 friends to your party. Here you can create a loadout for your character before you go into the dungeon by interacting with merchants who sell different types of goods. Fortunately, whatever you have equipped will be available to you in the dungeon, and the game actually gives you some starting resources. In the stash section, it shows your stats as well as your starting abilities for your class. The Barbarian has a general rage type buff that boosts a few of your stats at the cost of being more vulnerable, and you have an empowered attack that can penetrate your opponent's armor. You also get a bonus when using two-handed weapons, so that's pretty neat. The merchants have quests that you can do in order to get some resources and meta advancement. There are a couple of quests that seem like they would have some depth from a story perspective, but when you boil it down, it is a bare-ass collectathon, so to speak, that by all accounts could take you a while to achieve given the drop rates on some of the items they require. My favorite part is that the surgeon looks like the guy who played Alfred in The Dark Knight, so there's that. After going through and accepting all of the quests, I selected a server to play on and the dungeon I wanted to go to. I selected the solo dungeon just to give the game a try, as I'm sure most people would who just downloaded the game for free. There's a battle royale style waiting room before you load into the map, which, while funny, kind of felt out of place to me. I understand the concept of going to a tavern to make merry and such before going into the big bad dungeon, but it doesn't have that feeling. It feels like an empty space just made to plop players down into until a lobby's full. It doesn't feel like the life of a typical tavern and how that would be. The only life is other players moving around in very inhuman ways, jumping on tables and punching wanted posters. I was initially dumped into a dark prison cell of sorts, and I fumbled around with the controls to catch my bearings. This game does not do a great job of giving the player any direction or any sort of practical experience before you join a game. Typically, a game will give you some sort of on-rails experience to do outside of a normal game, where it guides you through a scenario, utilizing the tools that you have at your disposal to overcome simple challenges. Think of something like the first section of Oblivion or Skyrim. Instead, you're dropped in and expected to kind of just figure it out. I'm not saying every game that comes out needs to hold your hand, but a warm introduction to a game's systems is generally appreciated. I'll talk more about this as the video progresses, but I want the pacing to stay authentic to my experience. Once I figured out the basics and adjusted a couple of settings, I see that there's a chest in the room with me with some loot. I can't really use any of it, but I assume it'll be important to hold on to stuff to sell later for more supplies in the lobby. I turn the corner to see a skeletal archer. Still getting used to the controls, I bonk it with my torch, but quickly switch to my axe and kill it. It hit me pretty hard, but I can't tell if I lost a third of my health or an eighth of my health. More on that later. I cautiously look around and kill another skeleton in front of a trap. Neat. There are traps. Makes sense. I decided to see if I can break stuff with my axe, and I can. I really love it when games give me the ability to interact with things in the environment and test my curiosity like that. I know that I said the game is lacking direction, but having things like this doesn't really have anything to do with how the game actually controls. I had the thought, can I break this? And I could, setting a precedent for the rest of the game moving forward. Now I'll want to check every crate or barrel that I come across. I try out the bandage item, and it doesn't really heal for a whole lot. Same thing with the potion that does a very small amount of healing over time, and you can't stack the potions either. With my newly programmed open every crate mentality, I bust open the next barrel and proceed to get two-shot by a skeleton. This didn't feel good. I had just killed another skeleton before this one in about 2 hits, and I feel like that skeleton only did a fraction of the damage that this skeleton did. Fortunately, I go to the stash screen and see that I still have the items for my loadout, but I also see that nothing that I collected from the dungeon stayed in my inventory. It's at this point I realized I have absolutely no idea how the core functions of the game work, i.e. looting and getting stronger. I decided I would just jump in and give it another go and see if maybe the solution would reveal itself to me through some sort of hint or something. I get put into yet another closet and start killing goblins. Along the way, I saw a guy who looked like he was really kitted out, and he politely walked past me. What a nice guy. I'm not sure if it is because of the class I chose or something, but it seems like I can't use a solid majority of the gear that I find. I found a nice little stash of gear that I'm assuming the knight guy left in his path of destruction, and I put on a couple of pieces that I could equip. Now that I had a whole inventory of loot, I remembered a friend saying something about needing to get out of the dungeon somehow. I saw the blue points of interest on the map and figured that must be the way to go. But being really low on health, I see multiple goblins and I try to find a safer exit than the portal looking icon that's down below. After fumbling around a bit more, I was unceremoniously killed by a goblin. At the time, I did not realize that I had some sort of bleed effect, and it left me feeling like I was killed by lag or something. I was unaware up until right now, as I edit the video, that you could get these kinds of status effects and that a goblin could inflict them. At least my knight friends seem to be hanging in there alright. Shout out to Moses for not killing me, by the way. It was at this point I realized that I needed some kind of assistance. I clearly wasn't doing something right. I looked through the interface and saw the Request a Knight feature. This took me to a Discord server join webpage. I know this game is in early access, but having a Discord server to host your in-game help system kinda sucks. I have to pull my attention away from the game to go to a Discord server to look through forum posts for new player information. I almost felt overloaded by the amount of information that was presented to me, but things are well labeled and organized, so I found what I needed. They are expecting $30 for people to unlock the full game, so it's not quite a AAA price, but I hope they integrate these features into the game at some point in the near future. It's kind of bad form in general to rely on third-party software to provide critical information for your players, but I get it. I took some time to read through the information about extraction. Evidently, you collect stuff in the dungeon, and you look for one of these extraction points on the map. They are time-based, so it's not like you can just leave whenever you want. I'm personally not a fan of this because I would like to be able to just get my shit and leave, but I understand there's a PvP component to the game, and there needs to be a degree of risk associated with getting out. That, on top of the game being touted as unforgiving and hardcore, it stands to reason that making progress should be hardcore and unforgiving. Another attempt, another instance of me getting my skull bashed in. I'm bad, fair enough. I decided to go for a new tactic when I loaded in for my next round. I killed a few dudes, filled my inventory, and just so happened to spawn relatively close to an extraction point, so I just waited there until it opened. Finally, loot. I equipped the stuff I could equip and sold the stuff that I didn't need. You can only store gold in stacks of 10, but I guess that kind of makes sense if you're going for a pseudo-realism kind of thing. Some of the things I collected were worth a good bit, so I got a nice chunk of gold. I visited Alfred and friends to restock, then embarked on my next dungeon crawl, petting the pooch on the way before being accosted by a hooded figure. This round went like most had gone so far, except this time it was a freaking skeleton mage that roasted my pepperonis with little to no recourse. I won't lie, I was getting a little frustrated. My experience so far has been like taking shots in the dark, and darker, lol, KEKW, trying just to do anything at all. Maybe I just chose the wrong class or something. Maybe I should try something ranged. I went to the character select screen and realized I was going to have to delete the character I already made to try a new class. I was not horribly invested in Les Smashour, or even the game for that matter, so I yeeted the barb off of a proverbial cliff and made a wizard, thinking magic would probably have some more oomph. The wizard gets some basic spells like Magic Missile and Fireball, with the ability to take almost like a short rest in D&D to recharge spell uses. The Fireball has some AoE, and Magic Missile is like a skill shot nuke, or so I thought. I couldn't tell if the staff or the spell tome were significantly different, so I chose the one with a bigger number. The Fireball felt cool to cast, but it is easily obstructed by terrain. I tried to cast down this hallway, and it either didn't have enough range or hit something on the way to the enemy. I couldn't tell. When I did successfully land a hit, it seemed like it literally did nothing to the zombie. I threw everything I had at it, and it just wouldn't die. I know in the clip I kind of backed myself into a corner, but you would think unloading the gat would have killed the thing. There is no indication as to the effectiveness of your attacks. Trying to retreat, I alerted a mummy and tried to lead it into a trap, but I was easily overwhelmed. I tried to look for a way to show enemy health bars or something, but there's no option available. Upon reflection, I can understand why they would choose to conceal that information from the player. This game presents itself as a D&D light experience, and in D&D, as a player, you don't really know how much health the enemy has while you're trying to kill it. It just feels bad to me when I can pump everything I have into an enemy and there's no way of really knowing how effective it is, especially when I also have to worry about a real person coming up and killing me. In a game where you're expected to fight other players, I feel like knowing where you stand in the matchup is pretty critical. Moment-to-moment decision making is big in PvP, and I might make a different decision based on my opponent's health total. Even in a battle royale shooter where you don't explicitly know the opponent's health total, There are hit indicators as to whether or not you're doing shield damage or health damage, giving you at least some sort of indication. There are games where the health totals don't matter, but in those, the fights are over so quickly that the information isn't important. The next round is more of the same. I tried out the spellbook to see if there was a noticeable difference, but I unloaded 3 fireballs into a skeleton, and I learned how AoE damage works while still not killing the fucking thing. Straight into the next attempt, I decided to try and test how I could maybe open up with a fireball and then bonk a goblin to death. Ultimately, I still got my shit kicked in, and fireball blasted most of my own health. Given that the fireball seems to just be bad because of the close quarters nature of being in a dungeon, I tried out the magic missile. I unloaded 2 full casts into a skeleton and booped a snoot to kill him, almost dying in the process. Surprisingly, 1 cast did kill a skeletal archer, so that was cool. Then the mummy I faced next was a full cast of magic missiles and 3 boops back to the grave. Opening the door at the top of the stairs, I had a skeleton with an axe come at me, and I decided to test my theory on fireball. Is it actually just a piece of shit? I used all 4 fireballs. All of the fireballs I had available to cast, and I still had to whack him in the noggin to kill him. At this time, I remembered that one of my abilities refreshes my spellcasts, so I sat down for a second because I literally had to unload every spell I had just to kill 3 dudes. If you're a Dark and Darker player and have made it to this point in the video, I bet you're wondering, when will it happen? When is this idiot going to figure it out? One of the biggest, most essential functions in the game that I have either neglected or just have not noticed the whole time. That time, my friends, is now. See, this whole time, I had no idea why part of my health bar was faded out. I thought maybe it had something to do with my ability to heal from potions, or how much I could heal from using bandages. It turns out there was a button the whole time to rest and regain health. This little button, right here. If it weren't for me playing Wizard and needing to regain my spell slots, I don't think I would have ever known how this works. The game doesn't tell you. Sure, there's a hotkey right there, but there's no obvious tooltip. There's no hint that pops up on the screen during gameplay. Okay, maybe I would have stumbled upon this eventually, but up until this point, I had 0 clue, and you have witnessed my experience with this game. Finally, I sit down and rest to regain my health, and get ready to press on with renewed vigor. Dark and Darker, an unforgiving, hardcore, fantasy, FPS, dungeon, PvPvE adventure. In this moment, I realize something. This game is not meant to be enjoyed in the traditional sense. It's not meant to be played. This game is meant for people who choose to force themselves to experience it. I have tried my best to not frame this video as Dark and Darker bad. I'm not going to sit here and say that there isn't an audience for it. Clearly people log into this game and like it. I just don't think I can be one of those people. The core design philosophy is to suffer and contribute to the suffering of others. I honestly don't think that any major changes I could suggest would be in line with what the developers' intentions are with the game, but there are a couple of things I would do to give the game some more widespread appeal without corrupting the intentional brutality of the game as it is. Create some sort of in-game tutorial scenario. Tutorial often has a negative connotation when you're talking about games that are touted as being unforgiving and brutal. You don't have to be obtuse to be brutal and unforgiving. One of the most successful games ever made, the key selling point of which is how hard it is Dark Souls, and they have a whole area designed to teach the player how to play the game, the Undead Asylum. They don't use a bunch of info screens and quick time event prompts. It's just an area with messages telling you what the buttons do and presents you with reasons to interact with the systems in a low consequence environment. This game is often referenced as one of the most effective ways to have a hidden tutorial. There's no reason this game couldn't have something similar in order to give the player a warm introduction to the systems. Provide a PvE option. Even the most hardcore of players could attest that PvE encounters in the game are pretty freaking hard on their own. In most matches in a standard game, you don't even get the opportunity to fight another player, or even see another player for that matter. I would probably play the shit out of this game if I didn't have to worry about other players. I would have a really fun time going through the dungeons, killing and looting with the same framework. You are always going to have people who play the core experience, and that is the bread and butter of the game, but you could create more widespread appeal with a PvE mode, raising more funds to create more features and refine the game. There are many people out there who play RPG type games, even with multiplayer features, who straight up won't play a game if it doesn't have a PvE option. Health indicators. I can understand if this suggestion is not high up on the list or even on the table, but I feel like it would really benefit the combat system in this game. The combat is pretty simple mechanically. Click button, swing axe, shoot spell. There are nuances, of course, and there's a whole limb-based damage system and things, but when you boil it down to its parts, I felt like I was just blindly whacking at something until it died. Even if I did take the time to practice and learn the ins and outs of the combat system, I would pretty much only be counting whacks to prove whether or not I had improved in any meaningful way. Not to mention, if the player can tell where they stand in a matchup, it will create more opportunities for skill expressions like I explained earlier. But what do I know? I'm just a 30-something autistic guy on the internet. Have you played Dark and Darker? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments section. If you liked the video, hit the like button and subscribe to see what I have coming down the pipe. This isn't my typical format, but I'm trying something new and I had a lot of fun making the video. Until next time, this has been Dylon57. Have a good one.